The morning sun of 1874 bathed the rolling plains of Missouri, but the breeze that swept through Oakhaven Ranch carried more than the scent of damp earth and hay. It carried the echo of prejudice. John Miller, a man in his 40s, with hands calloused by labor and a kind gaze, watched his cattle graze. His ranch, built with years of sweat, was his sanctuary, but it didn't protect him from the growing hostility of the nearby small town, Harmony Creek. Harmony Creek was a dusty village, where whispers were sharper than butchers' knives. The population, mostly white settlers, harbored deep resentments against anything that reminded them of native peoples. The tension was palpable, and the arrival of a Native American orphan at John's ranch intensified the atmosphere. It all began a week earlier, during one of John's rare trips to town. A stagecoach had been attacked by bandits miles away, and among the few survivors was a frightened, lone Lakota boy of about 8 years old. No one in Harmony Creek was willing to help the child. Fearing for the boy's life, John, moved by a compassion few understood, took him to Oakhaven. The boy, who introduced himself only as Coda, was quiet, but his eyes expressed deep pain. At the ranch, Sarah, John's wife, a woman of strength and a big heart, welcomed Coda with maternal warmth. She fed him, tended to his wounds, and tried to teach him some English words, while Coda, little by little, showed a genuine curiosity about life on the ranch. John and Sarah's children, Emily and Thomas, initially curious, soon became Coda's unlikely friends, despite the language barrier. John's trips to town became an ordeal. The scornful glances and malicious comments were frequent. "Miller's harboring a savage. He's going to bring trouble for all of us. Don't trust one of them," were the most common phrases heard in the streets and the saloon. Caleb Stone, the general store owner and a prominent figure in Harmony Creek, was the main spreader of these rumors. A burly man with a loud voice, he saw Coda's presence as an affront to the community's order and an opportunity to undermine John's reputation, his indirect competitor in cattle buying and selling. One afternoon, as John was unloading supplies from his wagon, Caleb approached with a group of men, their faces contorted in contempt. "Miller, you're playing with fire," Caleb growled. "Keeping that boy here is madness. He's a threat, and if you don't get rid of him, the town will have to act." John, standing tall, faced Caleb with firmness. "He's just a child who needs help. Your prejudices won't change that." The tension was thick as the dust rising from the streets. Despite the growing pressure, John and Sarah were unshaken. They saw in Coda not a savage, but an innocent soul who had suffered. Each day, Coda opened up a little more, sharing fragments of his culture through gestures and drawings in the dirt. Emily and Thomas, in turn, taught Coda about the ranch, the animals and children's games, creating a bond that transcended differences. The small family, united by empathy, prepared to face the storm gathering on the horizon, unaware that Coda's destiny was about to collide with the ancient traditions of his people in a way no one in Harmony Creek could have predicted. If you're enjoying the story and want to follow the outcome of this exciting saga in the Old West, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters. The days that followed saw increasing hostility in Harmony Creek. John and his family felt the weight of ostracism. Neighbors avoided contact, trade became scarce, and even mail delivery to the ranch became irregular. Caleb Stone and his supporters spared no effort to isolate the Millers, spreading rumors that Coda was a spy or that his presence would bring the wrath of native peoples upon the town. Coda, though still reticent, began to adapt to the ranch routine. He helped John with small chores, like gathering firewood and feeding the hogs, and his curiosity led him to observe John's every move with the horses. There was a silent connection between the rancher and the boy, a mutual trust that transcended verbal communication. Sarah, with her patience and kindness, managed to coax genuine smiles from Coda, something rare since his arrival. Emily and Thomas spent hours with him, trying to teach him English words, while Coda, in turn, taught them how to recognize animal tracks and the sounds of nature, skills that John, though a rancher, recognized as profound and ancient. One afternoon, while exploring the banks of a small creek on the ranch's boundary, Coda found a small leather pouch, richly embroidered with beads and feathers. When he opened it, it revealed a dagger with a carved bone handle and an amulet that looked like it was made from the teeth of some wild animal. Coda held the amulet with impressive reverence, his eyes filling with silent tears. He tried to explain something to Emily and Thomas, pointing to the amulet and to the east, but his Lakota words were not understood. When he showed the find to John and Sarah, the atmosphere shifted. Coda, with a sparkle in his eyes, gestured with the dagger, making hunting motions. He drew the image of a coyote in the dirt, and then a circle with feathers. Sarah intuitively realized that the amulet and the dagger were objects of great significance to the boy, perhaps an inheritance from his family. John, though not fully understanding, felt the importance of the moment. The discovery of these objects brought new impetus to Coda. He became a little more communicative, using more gestures and drawings to express his thoughts. He began to observe the stars at night with unusual intensity, and, at times, was caught singing low, melancholic melodies in his native tongue, songs that seemed to carry centuries of history and suffering. Despite the growing sense of peace within the ranch walls, the pressure from Harmony Creek intensified. Rumors that John was corrupting the town's children with Coda's presence spread. Caleb Stone, growing bolder, threatened to organize a visit to the ranch to resolve the situation. The community was divided. A few, like old Mrs. Henderson, the town's midwife, looked at John with pity, but the majority, incited by Caleb, saw Coda as a threat and John as a traitor. One evening, as John and Sarah sat on the porch, they heard distant dog barks and then a sharp cry from the chicken coop. They rushed there and found Coda, dagger in hand, in front of a coyote that had tried to attack the chickens. The coyote, wounded, fled into the darkness. John, surprised by the boy's skill and courage, realized that Coda was more than an orphan. He was a survivor, with instincts and skills forged in a different world. The scene, recounted by Thomas in town the next day, was distorted by Caleb, who spread the lie that Coda had attacked a colonist's pet. The lie further ignited the population's fury, and John knew time was running out. The sky over Missouri grew heavy, laden with dark clouds that promised a storm. In Harmony Creek, the atmosphere was equally tense. Caleb Stone, seeing the perfect opportunity to resolve the problem once and for all, addressed the saloon, inciting the men to go to John's ranch. "We can't tolerate this anymore. That boy is a danger, and Miller is a fool for protecting him. Let's show him who's in charge of this town." About a dozen men, some drunk, others genuinely frightened by Caleb's rhetoric, agreed to march to Oakhaven. At Oakhaven Ranch, John had noticed Coda's unease. The boy had spent the day looking east with a worried expression. The wind began to blow hard, whipping up dust and leaves. Sarah was finishing dinner when a lantern light flickered at the window. John grabbed his rifle, and Sarah clung to their children, her heart pounding. A group of men approached the house, led by Caleb, who carried a torch. "Miller, come out and hand over the savage. We don't want trouble, but we won't tolerate this affront to our community." John opened the door, his voice firm despite his fear. "I won't hand over an innocent child. Go back to your homes before this ends badly for you." At that very moment, thunder rumbled, and rain began to fall in torrents, extinguishing Caleb's torch and throwing the men into momentary chaos. In the darkness and rain, Coda, who was behind John, ran out into the yard. He sprinted towards an old tree on the edge of the property, a large, solitary walnut tree, and began digging frantically beneath its roots. Caleb's men, caught by surprise by the torrential rain, hesitated. Caleb shouted, "Get the boy! He's escaping!" John, realizing Coda's intention, ran after him, followed by Sarah, Emily, and Thomas. John reached Coda just as the boy unearthed a small wooden chest wrapped in a leather cloth. Inside, there was an object that looked like a ceremonial pipe adorned with feathers, a smaller but richly decorated headdress, and a rolled-up map, old and weathered by time. Coda, with the chest in his hands, turned to John, his eyes shining amidst the darkness and rain. He began to speak in Lakota, gesturing with the pipe and pointing to the map. John, confused, tried to understand. It was then that, like a miracle amidst the storm, a lightning bolt illuminated the sky, revealing the silhouette of a group of mounted men on the nearest hill. There were dozens of them, with headdresses and spears, motionless under the pouring rain. Caleb's men screamed in panic, "Indians! It's an ambush!" Caleb, his face pale, tried to organize his men, but fear was greater than fury. John, stunned, looked at Coda, who was now pointing at the warriors on the hill, with an expression of relief and triumph. The boy then took the ceremonial pipe, lit it with a quick motion, and blew smoke into the rainy sky towards the riders. In response, one of the warriors on the hill raised his spear. The storm seemed to have brought not only rain, but also a revelation. John understood at that instant. Coda was not just an orphan. He was someone of importance to his people, and the pipe and the map were the key to his return. The smoke, the signal, and the 70 warriors on top of the hill revealed that John's compassion had not been in vain. If you're completely immersed in this Old West story and don't want to miss what happens next, subscribe to the channel now to continue this emotional journey. The rain stopped with dawn, leaving the air fresh and the ground muddy. Caleb's men had fled in the night, panic overcoming their rage. On the hill, the 70 Lakota warriors remained, imposing figures against the rising sun. John felt a mixture of apprehension and gratitude. He knew their presence was not a threat, but a response, a rescue. Coda, now with the ceremonial pipe in his hands and the small headdress on his head, seemed transformed. He was no longer the frightened boy, but someone with a purpose. He approached John, and using a mixture of Lakota and gestures, pointed to the warriors and to himself, then to John, and touched his chest, indicating gratitude. John understood. Coda had sent a signal, perhaps a prayer, and his people had responded. As the sun rose, the warriors descended the hill. They approached the ranch slowly, their horses treading carefully in the mud. John, holding Sarah and the children, watched. At the head of the group rode a tall man with a majestic headdress and a serious but not hostile gaze. He was the tribal chief, presumably Coda's father or guardian. Coda ran to meet the chief, who embraced him with restrained emotion. The scene was powerful, a reunion after an uncertain journey. The chief then turned to John. Coda, acting as a small interpreter with his gestures and the few English words he had learned, explained that the rancher had given him shelter and care. The chief nodded, and Coda introduced him to John and his family. The chief, whose name was Tatanka Mani, Walking Buffalo, spoke in Lakota, and Coda translated as best he could. Tatanka Mani expressed his deep gratitude. He explained that Coda was a boy of great importance to his tribe, the son of one of their most respected warriors, who had died in the stagecoach attack. They had been searching for Coda for days, following clues and their own instincts. The smoke from the ceremonial pipe, an ancestral signal for help and location, was what had guided them here. John then explained the situation in Harmony Creek, the hostility, the prejudices. Tatanka Mani listened attentively, his expression remaining impassive. John offered hospitality, inviting the chief and some of his warriors for a simple breakfast at the ranch, an offer of peace and respect. Tatankamani accepted, and the tension began to ease. As they shared bread and coffee, John told how Koda had adapted, about his bravery with the coyote, and how he had unearthed the artifacts. Tatankamani took the amulet and the pipe, his eyes showing deep emotion. He explained that they were family objects, passed down through generations, and that their recovery was a good omen. The conversation stretched on, with Koda translating the cultural complexities and intentions of each side. John realized that these warriors, feared by the town, were men of dignity and purpose, just like him. They were not there to attack, but to rescue and give thanks. Tatankamani expressed his desire to take Koda back to the tribe, but also offered John and his family an opportunity to build a bridge, not to be seen like the other settlers. He knew the rancher and his family were different. News of the Lakota warrior's appearance spread like wildfire in Harmony Creek. Fear and shame replaced fury. Caleb Stone, upon learning that the savages had not attacked John's ranch and, worse, had been seen sharing a meal with him, was livid. His authority in town drastically diminished, and many of his followers felt foolish for having been manipulated by his prejudice. Tatankamani and his warriors remained on the ranch's outskirts for another day, allowing Koda to say goodbye to the Miller family. The farewell was emotional. Koda, though happy to reunite with his people, had formed a deep bond with John, Sarah, Emily, and Thomas. He hugged each one, and his eyes, which once expressed so much pain, now shone with hope and gratitude. He handed Emily a small beaded object, a farewell gift, and promised John through gestures that he would always remember his kindness. Before leaving, Tatankamani addressed John, with Koda at his side. The chief extended his hand, and John shook it firmly. "You are a man of good heart, John Miller. Your compassion saved my son. May the Great Spirit be with you and your family." The chief's voice was deep, full of respect. He promised that the Lakota tribe would always remember the rancher's kindness and that Oak Haven Ranch would be a safe place. The 70 warriors, with Koda among them, departed silently, disappearing into the horizon as mysteriously as they had arrived. Oak Haven Ranch, which once seemed isolated, was now imbued with a new aura. The town of Harmony Creek, in turn, was forced to confront its own prejudices. Caleb Stone's humiliation was complete, and many who had once followed him began to look at John Miller with new respect. The story of John Miller and the Lakota Orphan became a whispered legend on the plains of Missouri, a tale of compassion that defied prejudice and bravery that transcended cultural barriers. John and Sarah proved that, even in the Old West, where distrust and violence were common, human kindness could flourish and build bridges where only walls once stood. Oak Haven Ranch became a beacon of hope, a reminder that true strength lies not in the fastest gun, but in the most compassionate heart. And so, under the vast Missouri sky, a new dawn of respect and understanding began to emerge.